For 12 years, I served the crown without my name ever being spoken beyond the palace corridors. I was the man behind doors that never opened, the shadow that followed orders before they were even voiced. They called my role many things depending on who whispered it: aide, handler, cleaner of mistakes. To the queen, I was simply there, like the stone beneath her throne or the banners above her head. I arrived before dawn every day, left long after the moon had climbed high. I memorized schedules, threats, rival factions, coded messages, and the moods of royalty. I stopped 3 assassination attempts that no historian would ever record. I buried secrets deep enough that even I forgot parts of myself. I never asked for thanks. Loyalty was my payment. The crown was supposed to be eternal, and I believed service meant security. That illusion shattered on a cold morning when a seal bearing royal authority was placed on my desk. The letter was brief, clinical, almost embarrassed. It stated that my services were no longer required, effective immediately. No explanation, no accusation, no gratitude. 12 years reduced to 3 sentences and a stamped crest. I stood there holding it while the palace moved around me as if I were already gone. Guards avoided my eyes, servants whispered, doors closed faster than usual. By sunset, I was escorted out the same gate I had protected for over a decade. I told myself it was politics, shifting alliances, budget cuts, royal paranoia. Still, the betrayal burned deeper than I expected. I had given everything: my youth, my safety, my anonymity. And in return, I was erased. What I did not know was that within 24 hours, the Queen herself would ask a question that would shake the palace to its foundations. Where is he? Freedom felt heavier than chains. Outside the palace walls, the world was loud, chaotic, and painfully indifferent. I rented a small room near the harbor under a false name out of habit. Even fired men of secrets do not abandon caution easily. For days, I waited for someone to knock on my door. An arrest, an execution order, a quiet correction of an inconvenient loose end. Nothing came. Instead, rumors drifted through taverns and markets. The Queen had noticed an absence. Meetings were delayed, reports incomplete, security oddly fragile. Inside the palace, things I once managed seamlessly began to unravel. Schedules clashed, rival nobles pressed closer, foreign envoys grew bolder. The invisible framework I had built was collapsing without anyone realizing what held it together. On the 3rd day, a messenger arrived, not for me, but searching. He asked the innkeeper about a man matching my description. I watched from the shadows as my absence finally gained weight. That night, palace guards argued openly in the streets. One spoke the words that confirmed everything. The Queen had asked where I had gone. No one had an answer that satisfied her. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt something close to grief. Because I knew what came next. When a ruler realizes they removed the wrong piece, they do not apologize. They reclaim. The Queen asked the question during a council session meant to discuss border disputes. Halfway through a heated argument, she raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. Where is the one who usually stands there? She asked, gesturing to the space beside her throne. No one spoke. Advisors exchanged glances. Ministers looked at their notes as if answers might appear. Finally, the chamberlain stammered that my services had been concluded. The Queen stared at him. Concluded how? She asked. When told of the dismissal, her expression did not soften. It hardened. And in that moment, the court realized a grave mistake had been made. She dismissed the council immediately, ordered internal records sealed, and demanded a full account of who authorized my removal and why. By nightfall, 3 officials were under investigation. By morning, 2 had fled. By noon, 1 was imprisoned. The queen did not rage. Her anger was colder, sharper, focused. She wanted answers. She wanted control restored. And above all, she wanted me found. They searched quietly at first. Old contacts, coded channels, discreet inquiries. But I had built those networks. I knew how to vanish within them. Still, the queen was relentless. Rewards were offered without public notice. Warnings issued to those who might interfere. I moved constantly. From city to city, identity to identity. Not because I feared punishment, but because I understood power. If I returned, it would not be as I was before. I would not kneel simply because I was summoned. The hunt itself began to destabilize the realm. Nobles grew nervous. Foreign spies panicked. Because if the queen wanted a man back this badly, it meant he knew things no one else did. Eventually, I allowed myself to be found. Not captured. Found. I sent a single message through a channel only she would recognize. 3 words. I am listening. The queen met me alone in a private chamber without guards. For the first time in 12 years, she spoke my name. She did not apologize. Rulers rarely do. Instead, she asked what it would take for me to return. I told her the truth. That loyalty cannot survive erasure. That service without respect is servitude. That if I returned, it would be by choice, not command. She listened. That alone was unprecedented. In the end, I did not return to my old position. I accepted a new role. One defined by boundaries, acknowledgement, and leverage. The court never learned the full story. Historians would later note a brief period of instability, followed by sudden reform. As for me, I learned that power does not always sit on the throne. Sometimes it stands quietly beside it. And sometimes, when dismissed, it reminds the crown why it mattered in the first place. The days after my meeting with the Queen passed differently than any before them. Not with urgency or fear, but with a strange stillness that comes after a storm has spent itself. I did not return to the palace immediately. Power renegotiated moves slowly, deliberately. Words spread without ever being spoken aloud. The Queen's shadow had changed shape. Some believed I had been broken and returned obediently. Others feared I now held influence equal to the throne itself. Neither was entirely true. My new role had no title that could be repeated in court gossip. I was no longer a tool to be used and discarded. Nor was I a ruler pretending otherwise. I became something far more dangerous. A constant reminder of consequence. I worked when I chose to work. I advised when silence would do more harm than speech. And for the first time in my life, I refused orders without punishment following. The Queen adjusted faster than anyone expected. She was not weak. She was adaptive. She learned that loyalty grows stronger when it is not forced into submission. Together, we dismantled systems that thrived on invisibility. Not mine, but those built by others who believed the unseen could never demand accountability. Several nobles resigned within weeks. Others were exposed in ways that ruined alliances quietly and permanently. No executions. No public trials. Just truth placed where lies once stood. The realm stabilized. Not because it was controlled, but because it was finally understood. At night, I often walked the outer walls of the palace alone. The same stones I once guarded without question now felt different beneath my feet. I was no longer protecting a symbol. I was protecting a balance. Sometimes I thought about the man I had been when I first arrived 12 years earlier. Young, eager, convinced that service alone gave life meaning. I did not despise him. I respected his innocence. That version of me believed loyalty was silent. That sacrifice went unnoticed by design. That being unseen was a virtue. I knew better now. True loyalty requires recognition. True service demands choice. And true power fears the moment, those it depends on decide to walk away. The Queen asked me once if I regretted leaving when I was dismissed. I answered honestly, no, because had I stayed erased, she would never have learned what absence reveals. She nodded slowly, as if committing that lesson to memory. Years later, when historians wrote of her reign, they would speak of reforms, stability, and unexpected wisdom. They would never mention my name. And that was fine. Some forces shape history by being visible. Others do so by reminding the visible that they are not alone. I still keep the dismissal letter, folded neatly, worn at the edges, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that even the crown can misjudge the weight of what stands beside it. And proof that sometimes being fired is not an ending, but the moment you finally learn your worth. Time does not slow for those who shape events from the margins. It simply moves on and leaves echoes behind. Years passed after the Queen's reforms took root. The realm prospered in ways that felt almost unnatural to those who had grown used to chaos. Borders held, trade flourished, rebellions dissolved before they could gather names. People credited the Queen's wisdom. They praised her restraint, her foresight, her calm authority. They were not wrong, but they were incomplete. I remained where I had always been most effective, just out of sight, just beyond certainty. My role evolved again as stability replaced urgency. I no longer intervened daily. Sometimes weeks passed without a single message exchanged. That silence was intentional. A kingdom that requires constant correction is already failing. I spent more time observing the people than the court. Markets, docks, farms, roads. Power reveals itself most honestly far from polished marble. I listened to merchants argue over tariffs that no longer strangled them, to veterans who spoke of borders that no longer bled, to children who played without knowing what fear of sudden levies or conscription felt like. That was when I understood the true cost of 12 years of service. Not the secrecy, not the danger, but the distance. I had lived my life inches away from history while never truly living within it. Now I walked among it, unrecognized, unremarked, free. The Queen aged visibly, not weakly, but honestly. Responsibility leaves its marks even on the strongest rulers. When she summoned me now, it was never urgent, never reactive, only thoughtful. She once asked what would happen when she was gone. Not dramatically, not with fear, but with the calm curiosity of someone preparing a legacy. I told her the truth she rarely heard, that no system survives forever, that no ruler escapes time, that the goal is not permanence, but resilience. She accepted that answer without protest. That acceptance told me more about her growth than any reform decree. As her reign neared its twilight, I began stepping back deliberately, teaching others without namming the lessons, placing people where integrity mattered more than loyalty, ensuring that when I vanished again, nothing would collapse. That was the final measure of success. to be unnecessary. The day she died, the bells rang across the capital. I did not attend the ceremony. Crowds and mourning are for symbols, not architects. I watched from a hill overlooking the city, the same harbor where I had first hidden after my dismissal years ago. The irony did not escape me. Her successor ruled competently, not brilliantly, but wisely enough, and the realm endured. That endurance was the quiet confirmation that my work was complete. I burned the dismissal letter that night, not in anger, not in closure, but in release. Some stories are meant to end without witnesses. Some victories are not meant to be claimed. I left the kingdom shortly after, not fleeing, not exiled, simply finished. I took no titles with me, no recognition, no reward beyond what I had already earned. If anyone remembers me now, it is only as a question occasionally asked in quiet rooms, a pause in conversation, a sense that something unseen once mattered greatly. And that is enough, because the greatest service I ever rendered the crown was not 12 years of silence, not the reforms, not even the lesson of absence. It was leaving behind a kingdom strong enough to forget me. Long after I left the kingdom behind, I learned how quiet the world could truly be. Not the enforced quiet of secrecy or caution, but the gentle silence of a life no longer measured by consequence. I settled in places where no one asked questions worth lying to. Fishing towns, border villages, roads that existed only because people still needed them. I worked with my hands, repaired nets, rebuilt roofs, carried goods between settlements. No one cared who I had been. They only cared that I showed up when I said I would, that I kept my word, that I listened more than I spoke. For the first time, my presence was simple. No shadows followed me. No strategies unfolded beneath my thoughts. The world moved at a human pace, sometimes at night, staring into a fire or watching waves strike the shore. Memories surfaced uninvited. The throne room, the Queen's voice, the weight of decisions that once bent entire lives. I did not regret them. Regret implies a desire to change the past. I had no such wish. Those years shaped me into someone capable of walking away without bitterness, capable of understanding that purpose does not vanish when duty ends. It simply changes form. I realized then that the crown had never truly owned my loyalty. I had lent it, and when it was mishandled, I reclaimed it without violence or hatred. That lesson stayed with me. Power is borrowed, respect is earned, and identity should never be surrendered completely to any cause, no matter how noble it claims to be. When travelers spoke of the kingdom, I listened quietly. They spoke of stability, of fair laws, of a ruler remembered kindly. I never corrected them. History does not need footnotes written by those who survived it. I was content knowing that the absence which once shook a throne now echoed only as peace. In the end, I was no longer the man fired after 12 years of service, nor the shadow the Queen searched for in frustration. I was simply someone who had learned his worth the hard way and lived the rest of his life light enough to carry it without burden.